Now let me introduce our leaders tonight. Sharon Schuman is the author of Freedom and Dialogue in a Polarized World. That's this book, and we're going to give away a copy later tonight. We do have copies for sale in the back, right off the lobby. So if you want to grab a copy, get it during the show or after the show. They're also for sale at J. Michael's or at Amazon.com. So Sharon is the author of Freedom and Dialogue in a Polarized World and taught literature at Deep Springs College, Willamette University, and University of Oregon. And our other leader tonight is editorial page editor Jack Wilson, who joined RG Media as an associate editorial page editor in 1985 and became editorial page editor in 2000. Prior to joining the Register Guard, Wilson was editorial page editor of the Corvallis Gazette-Times for 4 years, and he graduated from the University of Oregon. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to the stars of our show.
I'll just talk for a minute about the events that led us all to be here tonight. And it began when Sharon, who I've known as a contributor to our pages for some time, wrote an essay for our Sunday commentary section about polarization. And in that piece, she asked the question, what's so bad about polarization? And described how when someone raised that question in a setting maybe quite a bit like this one, she found herself a little bit stumped and had to do some deep thinking about that question. What is wrong with polarization? She attempted to answer that question in her essay, and a few days later, Logan showed up at one of our daily editorial meetings with a copy of that column under his arm and said, you know, this really got me thinking. This polarization, this is what you guys on the editorial page deal with all the time. People are fighting about these issues. They can never come to any kind of agreement. And she had kind of a new way of looking at how we approach these issues. And maybe there's something more we could do with that question. And I said, well, Logan, just so happens that Sharon emailed me this morning with an idea for a 6-part series about polarization and looking at 6 different aspects of how polarization comes about and how we can approach polarizing issues and maybe come to an understanding with people with whom we have fundamental disagreements. So Sharon is about halfway through her 6-part series. Her columns run every other week. We'll have one this Sunday, I believe. Right?
Sure. Right.
And Logan thought further, well, maybe we could have an event right here at the Register Guard where we invite readers who are interested in this subject to come talk about it and learn about it. And so here we are. And Sharon, who many of you know, is an incredibly distinguished person, concert violinist, author, learned woman in all respects, and has done some very deep thinking on the question of polarization. If you haven't read her book, I recommend it to you. You'll learn about a lot more than polarization. You'll get a pretty good course in Western civilization and literature as well. So I don't want to take up any more of her time. Sharon?
Thank you so much. Is this on? Okay. Thank you so much, Logan and Jack, for this incredible opportunity to come here and speak with so many people about what I call the big C conversation. It's like it's going on, especially in the editorial pages, but I have to say newspapers in general are at the heart of how democracy survives in America. And to be standing here in the middle, at the center of the Register Guard with the editorial page editor and the publisher, it just makes me feel good to know that we have this kind of support for democracy in America. Any opportunity I get to talk about my book, I'm a happy camper. And so tonight, you're here for that. But I'm going to talk about my book for about a half an hour. And then we have this amazing idea to break this group into smaller discussion groups according to various polarizing issues. And unbeknownst to you, you sat in a row about guns, or immigration, or healthcare, or whatever it was, because when you signed up to come here, you indicated what you thought were the most polarizing issues in America today. So I, in a slipshod sort of way, tabulated your responses and came up with 9 issues that are extremely polarizing. And so around the room, you've sort of organized yourselves to discuss one or the other. But what's different is that in the course of my presentation, I'm going to be urging all of us to think in a particular way about polarizing issues, not just think, how can I win this debate? How can I make a debate? How can I slam that opponent? How can I humiliate that opponent? How can I avoid discussing this because I know that person is never going to see it the way I do, which is, of course, the right way. None of that. We're not going to do that. We're going to do something else, and I'll explain it when we get going. But before we do all that, you're going to be subjected to some of my ideas. Now, the hard part, and I may have to get on the floor for this, because I have to look at a monitor from time to time. You have those monitors back there, and you have a monitor here. And you don't have to look at it, but I do have a PowerPoint presentation, and I'm going to be flipping my way through it. And you also have a handout, which you don't have to look at. By the way, they say never give people a handout at a presentation, because then they're distracted the whole time. Well, I break the rules, is all I can say. I wanted to give you some things to think about after you left. And so I'll refer to some of these things on the handout, and some of them I'll just skip. So here we are to talk about polarization. And they say if I point at the camera back there, it will, oh, there it did. Okay. All right. Polarizing issues. You yourselves chose these polarizing issues for tonight. You see what those various issues are: partisan politics, gun control, immigration, healthcare, race, President Trump, climate change, abortion, and income inequality. You chose those topics. We're happy to not address them in my original words, but we're going to address them in smaller groups later. What I want to talk about is the connection between polarization and freedom and dialogue. Because I think that if we can have better dialogues, we can reduce polarization. And if we can think about freedom in a way that's conducive to dialogue so that we feel more free, the more able we are to engage with dialogue with people that we don't necessarily agree with, the more motivated we will be to try to reduce polarization. So I have a method to all of this. And if you look at your handout, I criticize the idea of freedom as autonomy. Now, everybody here wants to be free to be left alone as long as we don't hurt anybody. We love that idea of freedom. I love that idea of freedom. But for various reasons, it's conducive toward polarization. That is to say, we protect that freedom as autonomy. Why? By protecting rights. We protect rights by passing laws. We pass laws by winning elections. We win elections by polarizing the electorate, putting a lot of money into it, and then stomping the opponent. And so freedom as autonomy promotes polarization. There's another kind of freedom, which is the truth will set you free. You know, that idea of freedom. If you just see things the way I do, you'll be free to be just like me. And Plato was the biggest advocate of that form of freedom. You get out of the cave and you see the blinding light of truth, and then you know what the good is. But there have been a lot of people since Plato who have thought that way. And it could be a religious truth, it could be a political truth, it could be a personal truth. I have a different kind of freedom, and I made up a word for it. And that's one of the reasons why they let me publish a book. But I swear I didn't create this idea of freedom. I'm just the first one to talk about it in this way. And so I call it dialogic freedom for reasons that I will explain to you. And according to this idea of freedom, which I embrace wholeheartedly, we all become more free the better able we are to see from the perspectives of others and take action in a world we share with them. Now, I have a definition of it which I'll give to you later, and it has 3 parts, and that's part of what presentation. Now, I want to give you a couple of examples of it. First I want to say, my hat's off to Mikhail Bakhtin, the Russian theorist, literary critic, philosopher, and generally brilliant man who had the misfortune to be sent to Siberia by Stalin and practically killed. But he wrote a lot of amazing books, one of which I stole some ideas from, because he liked to write about language. He didn't write about freedom at all, because they would put him in jail if he ever talked about freedom. But he talked about language. And his big idea about language was that if I'm talking with Jack, and Jack is talking with me, his response, even when he's just sitting there not saying anything, influences what I say. He's co-determining what I say, even though he's not saying anything. If he were to look at his watch, or go like this, like wrap it up, or, I would feel like, I guess I'm not being very interesting. But he's smiling and looking at me and looking rather supportive, so I feel encouraged. The idea here is that not just the language between us is created by both of us, as Bakhtin called it, a two-sided act. The one who's speaking and the one who's responding both create what's being said. It's not created in a vacuum. When he made that idea, he was disagreeing with prevailing ideas that said, if I say something, it's because I got an idea in my head, I put it into words, I lobbed it over to you, you decoded it, you understood it, and now it's your idea too. He said, nope, that is not how we communicate. We're always in it together. And so I took that idea and extrapolated it to talking about freedom. And so dialogic freedom has these elements. The first element, let's see if I can draw this up. What is that going to do? Go. What Bakhtin said was that word is a two-sided act. It is determined equally by whose word it is and for whom it is meant, the product of the reciprocal relationship between the speaker and the listener, addresser and addressee. It's a little bit jargony, but compared to other things that he said, very easy to understand. Here's an example of how that works. This is a great work of art that depicts Priam at the end of the Iliad, on his knees, begging Achilles, who is the most dangerous man living at that time, known for his anger and his ability to kill hundreds at a moment, who could snap the neck of that old man like a twig anytime he pleased. Priam's on his knees, begging for the corpse of Hector so he can bury it. That's the climax of the Iliad, to be a plot spoiler. And when he does that, Achilles' response means everything to what Priam does. And whether Priam succeeds or not in getting what he wants, which is the corpse to bury, depends entirely upon the response. And they're polarized. They're fighting a war, the Trojan War. And, well, he succeeds because it's a two-sided act, the decision, and he's able to see things from Achilles' perspective, and Achilles is able to see things from his perspective. So that's the first aspect of this dialogic freedom that I want to illustrate. Go! There. Second illustration of the same thing. I always do promise that there's naked ladies in my presentations. Dante, in the Inferno, says to Paolo and Francesca, the most famous characters probably in the whole Inferno, lovers who have been condemned for sex, illicit sex. He says to them, "Oh, wearied souls, come speak with us." And they say, it's because we could sense the
the love you had for us, the empathy you had for us, that we stopped to talk with you. So it's the idea that a conversation happens between them where Francesca justifies everything they did. She didn't do anything wrong, and that's a different story. But without the two-sidedness of that confrontation, the empathy that Dante shows, and their response to his empathy, there wouldn't be a conversation. So this idea of two-sidedness is shorthand for many-sidedness, and this is where it gets really personal for you and me. We all answer to so many forces in our lives. We answer to our families. We answer to our friends. We answer to our colleagues at work. We're wanting to know what they think of what we do. We have religious forces in our lives, political forces, the personal values that we embrace, or it could be just the concept of reason. We want to be rational, or we appreciate the law. We want to abide by the law, or our sense of justice, or just what we feel is right. These are all voices that we feel answerable to, and they don't always agree with each other. So for us to know what to do and how to make a decision, it involves a pretty good knowledge of our own selves. And lots of times when we get in these polarized situations, we've got these knee-jerk responses that short-circuit all of the self-knowledge that should be informing what we say and do. So the two-sidedness of things is important, the many-sidedness of things. The second concept I stole from Bakhtin and then applied to freedom has to do with the fact that we live in a world that's very complicated and chaotic, and we have ways of dealing with that. We have ideas that centralize our thinking, and we have things that challenge our ability to centralize our thinking. So we have an idea of a tree, which we say, oh, a tree is a tree. And then, but particular trees are different. Each particular tree is different. And our ideas about trees are completely different. Like the stories people tell, or whether someone was lynched from a tree. There's just many ways to think about trees, not just different species, but, you know, up a tree or hide and seek or whatever. So that tree was a tree that was destroyed by an ice storm in University Park. But so the idea of a tree is a unifying force, and the many trees that and other ideas about trees that we have are very disunifying forces. They're the difference between centrifugal and centripetal. So we have to, when we want to do something, we have to centralize our thinking enough to make a decision and take action, and that's difficult. So we have to acknowledge that when we're trying to think about freedom. So we've got these unifying forces of ideas and values, and we create narratives and patterns. The Democratic narrative would have Trump being insane. The Republican narrative would have the Democrats being power hungry and irresponsible. There's narratives that unify people's thinkings, but they're very polarizing sometimes. And the fragmenting forces that we deal with have to do with competing ideas or the unrepeatable events of our daily lives. You never step into the same stream twice. You never sit in the same chair twice in the same way. So every event from our life really is unique. And so we have to balance the unifying forces, which we need, or we wouldn't be able to take a decision and say, okay, this is what I'm going to do. But we have to balance that with the complex things. And when we succumb, and all of us do, to polarizing thinking, we err on the side of unity. Prejudice is full of unity. So we have this idea, the central idea of dialogic freedom is that we want to be able to navigate the perspectives of others, to see things as other people do. And it's sort of like being a fish that can dive way down into parts of the sea that, what if we try to see things in different perspectives that are really alien to us? So what Bakhtin once said was, there are professional jargons, generic languages, language of generations and age groups, tendentious languages, languages of the authorities, and various circles of passing fashion, languages that serve the specific socio-political purposes of the day, even of the hour. So all these languages are swirling about us all the time. It could be the language of a musician, or a language of a lawyer, or a doctor, or a plumber, or an electrician, or a criminal, or a young person, or an old person. If all you can understand is the language of another 65-year-old, or 71-year-old, or 18-year-old, or just you like to surround yourself with people that you like, and you just are living in that echo chamber all the time, what I'm arguing is that you're like a fish that restricts himself to one little layer of the ocean when he could be swimming just all over the place. And the more languages that you can understand and be part of and speak, the better able you are to make the best decision in a particular situation. So I talk about this dialogic freedom as an attempt to do all of these things, to balance, to understand the many-sidedness of a decision that we make, to balance the unifying and chaotic forces in our lives, and to increase the range of perspectives and languages within which we can operate. And this is all conducive to greater freedom and conducive to reducing polarization. Lest you think that I think this is a panacea and this dialogic freedom is the secret cure-all to everything that's wrong with America and the world today, I wish to point out a few little problems with it, because we have to watch out for these things too. Problems. Good old Dante. Remember last we saw him, he was empathizing with Paolo and Francesca, and so they were willing to talk with him, and we get Canto 5 of the Inferno, which is beautifully written. But at the end of that canto, he empathizes with them so much that he faints. It's like he's falling down almost dead, and his guide and companion Virgil supports him and keeps him from becoming lost in hell and sort of revives him, and you think, what the heck, what's going on here? Well, Bakhtin had some interesting things to say about empathy. Dante was experiencing excess of empathy. Bakhtin used to say, you should almost merge with or become one with a suffering friend in sympathetic understanding, and that's all good. But, he said, avoid pure empathizing, which would be re-experiencing all of the pain and anguish and specific despair, say, that your friend is caught in. Because then you're just reduplicating the suffering. You can't help. And so he says it's important that you keep a foot back in your identity, your values, and everything so that you can actually help a friend. Well, Dante swoons, and at the beginning of the next canto, fortunately, he wakes up. And what Dante says, pardon this Italian just for a second, al tornar della mente che si chiuse, at the return of his mind that had closed. This is what's interesting. What if the idea is you empathize so completely with a friend that it closes your mind and paralyzes you and makes it so you can't even make a decision to help? That's a complexity of this dialogic freedom that I'm recommending. You see from others' perspectives, but if you get swept into them too completely, then that's not good. There's another problem too. This is one I like even more. At least it's really fascinating. Takes me into one of my greatest favorite works of literature, Milton's Paradise Lost. I recommend it to everybody. You know the story, right? Will I be a plot spoiler? You know, mankind falls because of Satan, who does some bad stuff. I mean, I don't want to wreck that story in case any of you don't know it, but Satan says to Eve when he's tempting her to eat the apple, and think of this in terms of him being able to see from her perspective and really empathize in order to manipulate her. How about that? You're really good at seeing from other people's perspective, but you use it to manipulate them instead of to try to do something good. Satan says, look on me, me who have touched and tasted yet both live, and life more perfect have attained than fate meant me by venturing higher than my lot. He's got a good argument to make. Did it hurt me to eat the apple? I ate the apple. Look, I can talk now. Wow. It gets better. And then I don't know if you can read this. It's kind of small, but you've got it on your handout too. And I want you to see it here because it's so interesting to see how the temptation to manipulate others to get what you want. Because in our polarized world, that's what we want. We want to get what we want. We want to win. We want power. We want, you know, to squash the other side. Well, okay, Satan wants to get what he wants. And so Eve says, you know, we're not supposed to eat this tree, this fruit of this tree. God so commanded and left that command, sole daughter of his voice. The rest we lived law to ourselves. Our reason is our law. That's what she said. So if you were a really bad guy, like, for instance, Satan, and you wanted to get Eve to do something, she just handed to you on a platter a method to get her to do it. All you have to do is be reasonable, right? Okay, so he says, this is the part that I gave you before, but it goes on. I'll skip the part that I already read. He says, shall that be shut to man, which to the beast is open, or will God incense his ire for such a petty trespass? Notice the use of language, the brilliant use of language. He talks about the ire of God. I don't know if any of you are Christians or know about the Christian tradition, but guess what? God doesn't get angry. Achilles gets angry. God is perfect. I mean, you know, if you believe in Christianity and you believe the doctrine of it, which Milton did, the Christian God is omnipotent and perfect and omnipresent and all that. So Satan is saying, you're going to incense his ire. He's demoting God to a being that could feel anger. He's putting him on the level of Achilles. For such a petty trespass, it's not a big deal to eat that fruit. And not praise rather your dauntless virtue, whom the pain of death denounced, whatever thing death be. Guess what? Adam and Eve had never seen death before they fell. There was no death on earth. So to threaten death if you eat this apple, what kind of a threat of that is that if you don't even know what death is? And he says to Eve, whatever thing death is, because maybe it doesn't even exist. So he's planting doubt in her mind. Reasonable doubt. He's using reason. Deterred not from achieving what might lead to happier life, knowledge of good and evil, of good how just, of evil if evil be real. What do you mean? There's no evil in the world in paradise until Adam and Eve fall. That's the Christian story. So he says, why not know evil and good if it's real? Why not known since easy or shunned? This is a blizzard of very good reasons why she should go ahead and eat that fruit. And meanwhile, it's noon, she's hungry. This is Milton's version of things. And so the point here is that you can be really good at empathizing with others. Satan is really good at seeing from Eve's perspective, but he uses it to manipulate her, and that's not so great. So we have an example of a more recent figure who did something like that. Anybody recognize that mug? Okay, so I'll just move on. So a little summary here before we do our group discussion, which I'll explain in a minute. I become more free, the better able I am to see from the perspectives of others and take action in a world they share. That's the dialogic freedom idea. It's not without its problems. You have to resist the temptation to see from others' perspectives and manipulate them, or to have others see from your perspectives and be manipulated by them. Imagine there's a demagogue out there who can whip up your fear, who can whip up your distrust of government and stuff, and then can get you to do what he or she wants because so able to manipulate your fear. So you don't want to fall prey to manipulation, and you don't want to fall prey to manipulating others. If you can resist both those things, dialogic freedom is a great thing. So I want to talk about some practical applications. Abortion was one of the topics we're going to talk about today. Right now, I know you know that this is a polarizing topic, and we've got the right to life versus the right to choose. Notice that both sides speak in terms of rights. Both sides are using the talk of autonomy. You know, it's this freedom as autonomy that is part of it. Plus, both sides know they're absolutely right, capital T, truth. So freedom as a kind of enlightened, the truth will set you free idea. The polarization on abortion has a lot to do with how both sides view freedom. And they, of course, dismiss each other as fools. Now, echo chamber effect, we all know it. We love to have dinner with friends who all agree with us. I think it's a little boring, frankly, but we do it. And so I give you two demonstrations, one on one side and one on the other. I thought it was really interesting that they both used the stop sign effect. And, you know, they had certain things in common. And then if you go to the websites, like for the Right to Life websites or NARAL on the other side websites, you see a lot of stuff that's designed to tick off people who disagree, you know? I mean, it's fine if you already agree, then you like it. But if you don't agree, it's not like you're going to get enlightened. You're going to get enraged. And this is part of the problem of polarization. They say these really flamboyant things on both sides. So, an alternative, that's what we're here for tonight. I got this idea from this woman, Laura Chazin, who really about 25 years ago started the Public Conversations Project. It now has a different name, but it's all over the world. And it involves structured conversations, which we're going to try, that create and deepen and build human relationships and understanding. And it's really now in all 50 states and throughout the world. And you can go to publicconversations.org and look this up on your computer, and it'll lead you to the new name of the organization and various things. But what I want to talk about is I studied up their methods, and then I discovered that at the essence, they do a lot of stuff, but at the essence were these two questions that they had people think about, and I want you to start thinking about them right now in terms of whatever subject the section that you're sitting in deals with. What events or personal experiences, focus on personal experiences, were really important in shaping your views on this topic? Is there an experience that you could share with others, you wouldn't feel bad about sharing with others, that you could say, yes, this is very fundamental to my ideas about guns, or my ideas about Trump, or my ideas about abortion? And then, and this is the most interesting part, do you have mixed feelings or reservations or uncertainties of any kind about the position that you take on this subject? This is the most fascinating part of it for me. I decided to experiment with this with my very own sister. I wrote about this for The Guard, in case any of you read it. We completely disagree about abortion. And I won't completely replay that tape for you. But I will say that it was the first time we'd ever talked about the subject, and we both came away with it feeling greater love for each other, greater understanding for each other, and we didn't try to convince, either one of us convinced the other of anything. We didn't debate it. We just came to a better understanding of why we believe what we believe. And I think this is a very important first step. We're used to debate, we're used to argument, we're used to people taking one side or another, or anticipating the arguments of the opposition to demolish them. We're used to all of that. Personally, I've had enough. I understand the arguments on both sides of a lot of topics. What I don't have enough as is understanding how it is that people come to believe what they do. I want to know more about that. So, this fits into a larger picture for me of cultivating dialogic freedom by trying to identify your own values that you answer to, trying to sense if there's conflicts between the family members you feel answerable to and your sense of justice and law and religion that maybe isn't the same as some of your family members. Understand some of those conflicts and really throw yourself into trying to navigate the perspectives of others, and understand what do they answer to, what experiences are important for them, and is there for any of us any kind of common ground? That's where I think it all goes. But the experiment that I want you to be part of tonight is that I want you to take part in a small group discussion for about 15 minutes. We don't have a lot of time for it. Not all of you will get a chance to share an experience that you had that's formative to your views, or a doubt or reservation that you have about your opinions. But some of you will get to. And right now, we have 9 discussion leaders. I'm one of them. Jack is one of them. I want you all to stand up for a second, all of the discussion leaders. Okay, so they're sprinkled around the room. They're in every section that is here. And what I want you to do is, there'll be a line of your chairs, like the 3rd row. You can leave where they are. Everybody else turn around or move out. There's 3 rows for each section. Try to make a circle. And you'll make a circle, and then your discussion leader will help you try to discuss the polarizing issue that you're sitting in the terrain of. And after we're done with this, we'll have a discussion of the whole, what the whole experience felt like for you, and what you would like to, what questions you would like to ask. Okay, let's do it.
Promote and defend those principles as vigorously and energetically as they can. I mean, that's being part of it.
You can see where if you brought certain kinds of issues or problems
with issues and looking at choices and consequences that we've made in life, which leads us to the problem of the healthcare, that people who have been irresponsible should not feel entitled to the best health care possible when decisions they've made in their own life has affected that health care. So I think it needs to be a balance. So responsibility and your actions.
With other relatives who were already there. And it was just, my grandfather always spoke. He'd been in America at that point for over 80 years.
All right, I'm enlisting the publisher's gravitas and the editorial page editor's gravitas to encourage you to turn your chairs around enough to be able to participate in a discussion of the whole now. And there's a big live microphone standing up on a pole about 10 feet or so from me, and I invite you to get up behind it if you would like to share something about your particular discussion group, or your ideas about polarization, or your ideas about freedom and polarization, or any questions you have about what we've been talking about. It's a wide open discussion. It can go in any direction that you'd like to take it in. And all I ask is that you go to one of those microphones so that everybody can hear you. Would you like to say anything?
My group talked about partisan politics as a polarizing issue, and it had been identified by you folks as one of the polarizing issues that we might address. And we had a little bit of trouble deciding exactly what it is we were supposed to be talking about, because partisan politics seems more like something that exists than an issue that needs to be wrestled with. Abortion or immigration, these are issues that you can pass legislation about and be on one side or the other of. But partisan politics, that's kind of like it's a description of what we have. But I think just about most of us in our group, I think, had a chance to say a few words about this, and I didn't get a very friendly vibe toward partisan politics from this group. Nobody seemed to think that the intensification of partisanship that we've seen over the last 20 or 30 years has been good for the country or good for the political system. Nobody seemed to think that it was very helpful when we applied labels to each other, although there might have been some grudging agreement that we don't hesitate to apply labels to others. I kept trying to think, well, come on, is there anything positive that could be said about partisan politics.
It gets people involved. It makes people have fun. It gives people a sense of worth. It gives them a sense of having friends out on the internet that they'll never meet. There's a lot about it that's good. It helps raise money. It helps win elections.
It seems to work for certain people.
There you go. No, you know, one of the things that is amazing to me, but shouldn't be surprising, is every time something comes up, let's take the naming of Broadway Square, or whatever it's called, Ken Kesey Square, whatever it's proposed. That's suddenly a polarizing issue in this little town, this little backwater of ours where we live. And depending on sort of how you feel about other issues, you kind of click into place on one side or the other in that issue without necessarily even thinking it through what it means.
It's an identity marker.
Huh?
It's an identity marker.
Yeah, anyway. So, I mean, the polarizing, what is it? Partisan politics. What's amazing to me about it is that you could pick anything, any subject, and within 5 minutes, we could figure out which side of the polarized divide an opinion lands on. And it's so the opposite of trying to understand something in depth, when the truth of the matter is we live in a world that is so full of problems, real problems, incredible problems, that wouldn't it be nice if we could just say, wow, what are some of the aspects of this problem that would be nice to know more about, instead of which side are you on?
Let's hear from another group. Come on, I could hear people talking back there.
Jack's going to give you his.
All right, that would be, because I've now broken this one. Thank you. My groups told me to come up and talk. So,
what was your comment?
It was income inequality, and you know, in Eugene, there are people on opposite sides, and we did have people that were on opposite sides. And what I really liked is that everyone was able to use the model pretty easily, and that they were able to find a really important and personal experience to share that really helped us to understand why they were on a particular side of the position. And we found that we were actually much closer than some people might think. So we all agreed that there were some people who didn't fit into the system, but that people who work really hard should be able to be rewarded for their hard work, and that we want to foster innovation. But we don't want members of our society to have no hope, is the way that I looked. Am I telling it right? And we had a lot of people who were hard workers, but we also noticed that the system had changed from when we were children, that some of our values that we held when we were younger and we held very strongly just don't fit anymore, because the society is changing and the expectations and the way that the cost is going. So it is a very complicated problem. But I think we really saw each other's view very well. So thank you very much for this opportunity. The next person.
There's someone who wants to hand it to her.
Hi, I'll share a little bit what we talked about in the climate change group. And most of the group, actually all of the group, I believe, we were concerned about climate change. So there wasn't a divergence of opinion to discuss. But the people shared from personal experience of a lot of scientific background, people that have science teachers, professionals in the sciences, so their knowledge base is what reflects their deep concern. They think the situation is worse than is generally talked about. So it was hard for our group and most of the participants to actually engage in the doubt part. It was hard to say what the doubts were around the position on climate change. That was very difficult. There was also the need was that we need to, and one person shared that when he had the experience of listening to someone who was a denier, and he had to listen to that a lot because of the situation, and he did not get to reflect back his opinion, how taxing that was, how it's very hard to listen to someone coming from the opposite perspective and not get to have an exchange.
So do you think that next time he talks to that person who's the denier, what would happen if he disrupts the normal flow of conversation?
I don't think he could.
What experience did you ever have a personal experience that was formative for you in your opinions about denying climate change?
I'm not sure if that particular person could, in that situation, he could do that. But it seems like the need to have the dialogue. We did agree in the group that we need to have the dialogue with the people that are in a different position.
Right.
And I think we need to look deeper into the doubts that we may have and try to bring those up and share those vulnerabilities. But that's hard.
Yeah, I went to a Catholic school, and the headmaster was he was a biology teacher, and when asked by the students when he was visiting class if he believed in evolution and that do men come from monkeys, he said, well, there's actually some coalition between science and religion. There's not so much disparity between the things that are taught in spirituality and the things that are taught about nature. And if we want to survive as a species and even include other species in our survival, we need to protect the environment, because we all depend on the air, the water, the soil, the toxins in the air and in the water.
Can I
Sure. Jack Wilson, nice to meet you. I'm Dave Piccioni.
Could I just add to something? The vocabulary we use in discussing these matters, I think, is often really important. I found myself on the phone not long ago talking or debating or arguing with someone about climate change, and he said, well, you obviously believe in climate change. And I said, no, I don't believe in climate change. It's not a matter of faith for me. I accept the evidence that suggests what scientists have concluded is happening with the climate. That's different from belief. It's different from faith. And I think if we're careful in the words we use to describe our positions, we might be in a better position to defend those and also to understand where other people are coming from.
I think there's a hand over there.
I'm not sure I'm going to do this justice, and I can only really speak for myself. We had what I would call an uncomfortable exchange in our group, and we were talking about immigration. And so people were sharing their experiences that were formative about immigration. And it was very clear that people had experiences that were very diverse and that their opinions were very strong about this issue. And so that really strong opinion seemed to be expressed, and I felt some discomfort among the group that they actually asked somebody to kind of stop and get the process going again, because it's as if I was feeling like I was trying to be convinced of something. And so I think the exercise was really good, because what I understood from the person who had an experience that was very different from mine is that there was a very valid reason for this very strong opinion. But once it started going beyond being just my experience and started being pointing my finger at you, then it started feeling really uncomfortable. I think not only to me, I can't.
This is why we had facilitators in all the groups, because that's what I anticipated happening, that people would do the experiences and they would do the doubts, but it would be very hard to resist saying, and this is why I believe X and you should agree with me. Did you want to speak?
It got my heart pounding.
I think
so.
Sharon, I'll jump in. Is this on?
Dave, let's let David speak.
I was the facilitator of that group, and she describes it very well. And what I learned was one of the members of the group had a very passionate point of view, and was expressing that passionate point of view And so as the facilitator, I said, well, do you have any reservations or doubts? And this person said, no. I don't. I feel very strongly about this. So my first reaction was to say, do you know any immigrants? And then I realized that's exactly what we weren't supposed to be doing. The temptation on my part was to engage in an argument and try and convince her that her position was wrong. And I managed to stifle the impulse, but it was very educational to see how quickly and how easily it is to just sort of engage by a response that is an attempt to win an argument, as opposed to an attempt to understand.
Well, that's so interesting, because I feel like the powerful magnetic force pulling us to the two poles, for or against something, is always a default. It's the path of least resistance. It's the thing that's intoxicating and seducing us at all times. And if we want to make the effort to try to understand someone else's perspective, or try to avoid getting up on our soapbox and saying, this is why you should agree with me, that is a tremendous effort. And we'll be always asking ourselves, God, is it worth it? Do I really want to go to that kind of an effort?
We had healthcare, life and death, and we began by having everybody go around the room and tell, in whose name were we there for this conversation, and to really begin with what rooted us to care about this issue. And one of the things that happened, because there were divergent points of view, but it wasn't about, as it turned out, by having the divergent points of view, we saw the common ground. And it wasn't that we disagreed per se on affordable or accessible health care, because everyone agreed that society really needs people to feel able to contribute in any way they can and to belong and to be a part of a society. Suffers to the extent that anybody is left out. But what emerged, I thought, that was so interesting was that the people who felt that it was really important to have accessible, affordable health care in a universal way, for example, it was out of fear for what would happen to people that they love and institutions they love if we didn't have it. So it was rooted in fear. There wasn't an opposite side to that, but there was a different way of looking at the issue, which was justice. Is it fair that I work my whole life and I am responsible and I put money in to support people who may not have done that, and that's, how do I justify that to myself? You know, that doesn't seem fair, that sticks in my craw. You know, I have a hard time justifying that. So it was a justice issue, and we all agreed that the issue of how do we take care of each other, that's the real challenge, and that we're up to that as a society. So I thought that was very useful.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who has a question or comment or anything that they would like to share with the group as a whole?
Well, I was part of the immigration discussion, and I was part of that uncomfortable moment when somebody was really passionate about why she believed what she believed. And I just sort of sat with it for a while, and after other contributions, I realized that perhaps the person came from a place of caring deeply about what would happen if we had open borders and there were not enough resources for everyone, and also the destruction of the environment and water resources. And I realized that this person's passion very likely came from place of caring deeply. And I realized that I care deeply about the same things. And it really turned a little switch in my head that oftentimes we agree on the deepest levels, but we have very differing views about how we get there. And
thank you very much for that.
It was very interesting.
Okay, now we're going to run out of time. Maybe we'll get one last comment from the very back of the room.
I just want to say thank you for doing this. And it gives me hope. I'm really hopeful that you'll continue this in some way. Process, people, whatever. It seems like we're interested in doing something.
Well, that's a very sweet comment to kind of conclude with. I want to say to everybody here, I challenge you, you know, Thanksgiving is coming up. Don't you need to spend time with relatives? Honestly. And the next time you're afraid to bring a subject up at all, or somebody brings up a subject you'd rather not discuss, etc., just trot out one of these things like, do you have any reservations at all? Because that might sound like an attack. No, trot out, can you think of an experience that was really foundational for you in your development of this view? Because I did this with my sister, and I was amazed at what she said. She was amazed at what I said, and it really built a bridge. Is that it, the bridge? You build a bridge, yeah. That's a good thing. So I challenge you to take these strategies with you, and if something really succeeds or, heaven forbid, fails, my email is on the handout. And, you know, I got these 3 articles to write. What am I going to write about? What am I going to write about? I want your suggestions for that, and I hope that some of you will want my book, and we're going to give away a copy of it right now. And I got my publisher to give me my author discount on 10 copies of the paperback version. It's still outrageously expensive, but I paid $20 for it, so you can have it for $20 on your way out if you want, and we're going to give one away right now. Oh, I'm not going to draw it.
You might wait until the carving knife has been put away before taking Sharon up on her suggestion. And I do encourage you to tune in to the next installments in her series on this important topic.
Coming right up, which I'm going to think up soon. Who's Larry Barnett? Did I read it wrong? Did he leave? No Larry? Okay, let's do another one. You got to be here to get the book.
No, you're playing tricks with us.
James McDonald? All right, he gets a book. It's here. You're younger than me, you can go grab it. Pretend to read it. Start with the epilogue. It's the 4 pages long, and it's really quite readable. Okay, so I want to maybe turn the microphone back over to Jack and Logan. I just want to thank you all for this opportunity because I think it's been really fun.
I want to thank you all for coming here on a Monday night. I'm amazed to see so many folks interested in this. I deal with polarization and polarized issues in my work every day. If any of us can learn how to understand each other and maybe grow in our own understanding of these issues, that will be a truly wonderful thing. So I really appreciate Sharon for giving us some tools for moving in that direction, and look forward to the rest of her series. Thank you all.